The bell above the bakery door jingled softly, a fragile sound that seemed almost out of place in the quiet street. Sana looked up from wiping down the counter, flour smudged on her apron and hands. The man who had entered didn't belong in a place like hers. His suit was sharp, almost too crisp for this dusty neighborhood, and his shoes gleamed as though they had never seen a puddle. But despite his elegance, he moved slowly, hesitating at the edge of the counter, as if unsure whether he was allowed in. When the woman in front of him stepped away, leaving a trail of coins on the counter, he approached. "Excuse me." His voice was soft, deliberate, almost careful. "Do you have an expired cake? For my daughter." Sana blinked. She paused mid-swipe of a crumb off the counter. Expired. People never asked for expired cakes. The thought of it made no sense. "Expired, sir, I throw those out," she said cautiously. "They aren't for sale." He shook his head quickly, almost apologetically. "Not to eat," he said. She collects them. My daughter. She says old cakes have stories. Today's her birthday, and I've been trying all morning to find one." Sana frowned, scanning the nearly empty display. The idea sounded absurd, yet there was something in the way he said it, something genuine, almost desperate. She found herself softening. "I might have one," she said, ducking below the counter. She pulled out a cake boxed days ago, the icing dull, slightly cracked, the sponge dry at the edges, but otherwise intact. She had set it aside to throw away, yet now it felt suddenly valuable. The man's shoulders relaxed, a quiet relief washing over his face. "How much?" he asked, still polite, almost embarrassed. "Nothing," Sana replied. "It's expired." He shook his head firmly. "I insist. She deserves it." Sana pushed the box toward him. "Then pay with a story." "Why does she collect them?" she asked, curious despite herself. He hesitated, glancing at the empty bakery, as though the walls themselves were listening. Finally, he spoke, voice softer than before. She was sick for a long time," he said. "In the hospital, she watched cakes arrive for other children. She never felt well enough to eat them, but she loved looking at them. When the cakes got old, when everyone forgot them, she would ask the nurses if she could keep the box." His gaze fell to the box, a shadow of sadness and love mingled in his eyes. "She told me once that old cakes understand loneliness." Sana's chest tightened unexpectedly. The cake, which she had considered trash, now seemed like a vessel of hope. She smiled gently. "Then this one is perfect." He nodded slowly, clutching the box as though it were fragile glass. For a brief moment, the busy city outside felt miles away. Inside the tiny bakery, a millionaire, a small lonely girl, and an expired cake connected in a quiet, unexpected bond. The millionaire lifted the cake box as though it were made of glass, handling it with a reverence that made Sana pause. She had sold plenty of cakes before, but no one had ever treated one like it carried a heartbeat. His eyes lingered on the dull icing and slightly dry edges as though reading a story hidden in its folds. "What's her name?" Sana asked softly, leaning against the counter. "Ayla," he replied. His voice was almost a whisper, filled with a tenderness that contrasted sharply with his commanding presence. "She's turning 8 today." Sana smiled, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "Happy birthday in advance to her," she said warmly. Then her gaze drifted over his suit, noticing the creased tie and the faint scuff on his polished shoes. "Looks like you've been running all over the city," she said gently. He chuckled, a little embarrassed. 7 bakeries, he admitted. "Most people thought I was unusual." "Maybe you are," Sana teased lightly, a glimmer of humor in her eyes. "But the good kind." He looked up at her in surprise and then smiled, the tension in his shoulders easing just slightly. As he turned toward the door, Sana's fingers itched to do something small, something kind. "Wait," she called, her voice carrying just enough weight to stop him. He paused mid-step, the box held carefully in both hands. "Do you want me to add a ribbon? Kids like ribbons, even on old cakes," she offered. His expression flickered, relief, gratitude, and something softer. "Yes, please," he said quietly. Sana tied a thin pink ribbon around the box with careful fingers, looping it neatly into a bow, remembering how she used to make little surprises for her niece. The man watched silently, as though witnessing a private ritual. When she handed it back, he didn't take it immediately. Instead, he asked quietly, almost shyly, "Why are you so kind?" Sana froze. No one had ever asked her that before, at least not with such sincerity. "Because someone once was kind to me," she murmured. "And it saved me on a day I thought I was done." The man nodded slowly, his gaze falling to the floor for a brief moment. "I understand," he said softly, his voice almost a whisper. He stepped toward the door again, the cake held carefully against his chest. "Tell her," Sana said suddenly, urgency and warmth mixing in her tone, "that this cake was special. That it waited for her." He looked back, his eyes glimmering. "I will," he promised. Outside, the black car waited at the curb. A small face pressed against the window, bright eyes scanning the street. "Ayla," Sana watched as the girl spotted the box, her small hands clapping together in delight. Her smile was radiant, lighting up the dull street. The father's gaze met hers through the glass, his eyes quietly saying thank you without a word, and then the car drove away. Sana stood at the counter, hands still dusted with flour, realizing that sometimes, the smallest gestures, an expired cake, a ribbon, a story, could carry more meaning than all the wealth in the world. A week passed, but Sana didn't expect them to return. People like him, wealthy men with polished shoes, tailored suits, and quiet confidence, rarely revisited small corner bakeries. Their worlds were separated by glass doors, taxis, and offices with names she would never see on a building. Yet that afternoon, the bell above the bakery chimed, soft and cheerful, pulling her attention from the counter where she was arranging cupcakes. She looked up. Ayla stood there, small and bright-eyed, clutching the same cake box she had received a week ago. It was now decorated with stickers, colorful drawings of stars, hearts, and little smiling cakes, and a shaky ribbon that had clearly been tied by a child. Behind her, the millionaire father lingered by the door, giving his daughter space to step forward on her own. His presence was quiet, protective, almost reverent. "You made this?" Sana asked gently, leaning over the counter. Ayla nodded, her hair tied into a crooked ponytail, eyes shining with excitement. "I draw stories for the cakes," she explained. This one was lonely for a long time. But now it has a friend." She pulled out another drawing, a simple sketch of Sana standing behind her counter, handing the cake to her father. In the corner, in uneven letters, she had written, "Thank you for saving the cake." Sana felt her throat tighten. The gesture was so innocent, so full of honesty, that it struck her more deeply than any polite compliment ever could. She glanced at the father, who looked away quickly, pretending to examine the pastries as though giving them privacy, though she could see the pride in his posture. "Did you have a good birthday?" Sana asked softly, leaning closer to the counter. Ayla's grin spread across her face like sunlight. "The best. Baba told me you added a ribbon because you thought I'd like it." "I hoped you would," Sana replied, smiling. Ayla's small hands reached into her pocket and pulled out something, a handful of tiny, shiny stickers she had saved. "These are for you," she said. "For making my cake feel happy." Sana took the stickers gently, feeling the weight of the simple gift. "Thank you, Ayla. That's very sweet of you." Her father finally stepped closer. "We just came to say thank you," he said, his voice calm, but his eyes betrayed a deep gratitude, the kind that comes from someone whose heart has been touched unexpectedly by another's kindness. Before leaving, Ayla tugged gently at his sleeve. "Baba, can we come again? I like this bakery." He looked at Sana, a small smile tugging at his lips. "If she wants to come, we'll come." Sana watched them walk away, father and daughter stepping back into the sunlight. The millionaire carried nothing, but Ayla held her ribboned cake, her drawings, and a newfound story blooming in her hands. Sana stood behind the counter, realizing that sometimes the smallest acts, a ribbon, a box, a few stickers, could create connections that money or status never could. A few days later, the bakery felt quieter than usual. The morning sunlight streamed through the dusty windows, painting golden streaks across the worn wooden floor. Sana was restocking jars of jam, humming softly to herself, when the bell above the door chimed again. She looked up, half expecting a regular customer, but instead, she saw him, Zion, the millionaire father. He entered alone this time, moving with the same quiet, deliberate grace that had caught her attention before. No cake box in his hands, no hurried steps, just him, standing in the doorway as though he had paused at some invisible threshold before crossing in. "Good morning," he said. His voice was calm, measured, but carried a hint of anticipation. "Morning," Sana replied, straightening her apron. "Ayla not with you today. She's at school," he explained, his eyes scanning the bakery as if noticing every detail for the first time. "But she told me to come. She said I should bring you this." He handed her a small envelope, bright with childish scribbles, smiling cakes, balloons, and tiny stars drawn in crayon. Inside was a note written in uneven handwriting. "Thank you for giving my lonely cake a home before me." Sana traced the letters with her thumb, feeling a warmth that spread from her chest to her fingertips. "She adores you," Zion said softly, his tone quiet, almost confessional. "She talks about you the way children talk about heroes." Sana felt her breath catch. "I only gave her an expired cake," she whispered. "You gave her something she hadn't felt in a long time," he replied, his eyes meeting hers. Scene. The bakery fell into a comfortable silence, filled with the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of cars on the street. For a moment, it felt like time had slowed, and the outside world, with its rush and pressure, no longer mattered. "Can I ask your name?" he said finally, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Sana," she said. "I'm Zion," he said. The name sounded solid, grounding, like the man behind the polished suit and tired eyes. Sana smiled softly. "Nice to finally know the name of the man who buys old cakes." He chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I don't usually ask strangers for expired pastries. Maybe you should start," she teased, her eyes twinkling. "It makes you interesting." Zion's gaze lingered on her for a long moment. "Ayla wants to collect more stories," he said eventually. "She asked if you could make one, specially for her. Not expired, just different. A story cake," Sana repeated, a small laugh escaping her. "Give me a day." That night, she stayed late in the bakery, frosting a cake with uneven swirls and tiny sugar windows. She shaped it like a little house waiting for visitors, a cake brimming with imagination and tenderness. Not expired, but carrying the same love and care as the one that had started everything. For the first time in a long while, Sana felt the quiet thrill of creating something that mattered, not just for taste, but for hearts.